Hello and welcome to this evening's international rally. I'm Sarah Woolley, General Secretary of the Bakers Food and Allied Workers Union, a long-time affiliate to the Venezuela Solidarity Campaign, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this online rally today. We are here for a major international event against Trump's aggressions in Latin America and to mark 20 years of the Venezuela Solidarity Campaign in Britain. 20 years of proud campaigning, sometimes against the odds, but always bringing much needed anti-imperialism to the movement here in Britain. This important event will look at how the US's illegal sanctions on Venezuela, introduced by Obama, advanced by Trump, maintained by Biden, and now under Trump again, being further deepened, have created a blockade of the country that aims to strangle its economy and achieve illegal regime change, but is now being beaten back. Additionally and disgracefully, the UK government endorses these sanctions and is currently supporting the Bank of England, which is refusing to return to Venezuela over £800 million of Venezuela's gold, which is held in its vaults, which would be used for health and humanitarian programs. Now, more than ever, extra pressure is needed on the US and the UK governments to end the sanctions and give back the gold, and of course, support the work of the Venezuela Solidarity Campaign. We've got some amazing speakers this evening, and because we've got so many amazing speakers, I am going to move straight on to our first speaker, who is Kate Hudson from the CND, who is going to speak to us for about 5 minutes. So, Kate, you are very welcome.
Thanks very much, Sarah. And of course, this is a crucial time for all of us as we work together to prevent any attacks on Venezuela and Latin America, whether they're military, political, or economic. I'm proud to be a founding member of Venezuela Solidarity Campaign 20 years ago, as we got together to defend the Bolivarian revolution under the inspirational leadership of Hugo Chavez. In 2006, I attended the World Social Forum in Caracas, representing my own organization, the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament. And this was really a seminal moment for me, not only to experience the intense beauty of Venezuela and the solidarity and hope of tens of thousands of activists from across the world, but also to see and understand the role that a progressive government could play. And not only in terms of economic and social policies at home, but in terms of the role it could play globally for peace and justice. The significance of that moment in Caracas was the realization that the political dynamic need not be movement against state, but that the state can and should be with the movement, with the people in their most dynamic and organized form. And we saw that so clearly in Venezuela, and we have seen it in a number of other Latin American countries over the past 2 decades. And the causes of that time on which Venezuela and other Latin American states stood firm mirror those of our own time, almost exactly. Opposition to war, supporting the rights of the Palestinians, standing against foreign military intervention, and against the nuclear hypocrisy of the West in its warmongering against Iran. And of course, underpinning all those stands the continent-wide opposition to nuclear weapons. Now, I'm sure you know that the Chavez Constitution of 1999 included that opposition to nuclear weapons, and that in itself was underpinning the treaty which had already been passed in Latin America and the Caribbean for a nuclear weapons-free zone across the region. And that remains in place. That treaty remains in place today and is really a beacon of hope and inspiration for peace and campaigners across the world. Central to Chavez's vision of peace through diplomacy was his advocacy of Latin American integration and the democratization of international institutions and how much we need that democratization today. He had initiatives, he led initiatives like the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States, and ALBA, of course, the Bolivarian Alliance for the Peoples of Our America. And they were path-breaking, really path-breaking initiatives, not only for their positive impact on the countries involved, but because they represented a powerful move towards a multipolar world order based on cooperation and solidarity, and how crucial that remains today, and how that has been built on, that multipolarity has really developed today. And that move towards multipolarity is ongoing, and I consider it to be an unstoppable force. And I think all the evidence shows that is the case. And here in the global north, where I am, we can feel overwhelmed by the horrors of imperialist war, by genocide, by the economic devastation caused by capitalism in crisis. But we always have to remember, and I'm sure people here are so aware, that the world, that the global majority in the world is on the move with a powerful economic and political dynamic for a new type of society, for a new type of international relations based on justice and peace. And that was so fundamental, enshrined in the work of Chavez and the Bolivarian Revolution and other states in Latin America who share those same values. So we are part of that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kate, and for keeping to time too, setting us off very well. I'm going to move swiftly on to our next speaker, who is Fiona Sim from Black Liberation Alliance. Fiona, you are very welcome.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Sarah. I'm really glad to be here today. And I guess I just want to start with the fact that, we could not be living right now in more tumultuous times. We've got the wars on Iran, the wars on Palestine, the proxy wars in Russia, the Cold War in China, the resource wars in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and not to mention the ongoing tariff wars and sanctions regimes on Cuba, Venezuela, Belarus, to name just a few, and the absolute exploitation of some of the most already oppressed and underdeveloped nations on this planet. But despite all of this, I strongly believe we would be mistaken to believe that this all points towards a future of defeat and the total decimation of humanity. Nihilism, pessimism, as a comrade from Brazil I met earlier this year in Venezuela said to me, it's just a tool of the oppressors. They want us to believe we are condemned to a life of misery and division. They want us to believe that we do not have the power. But those of us in the motherland, those of us who are sitting in the bullseye of imperialist aggression, have identified this as false, and that we have to resist this fallacy with every single fiber of our being. Because ultimately, no matter whether we're in the global south or global north, we do have the strategies. We do have the people on our side, as this week has shown with the potential prescription of Palestine action and the mass mobilizations across the entire left spectrum. And we know we do have the power, but what we need the hope. And this is exactly why it's so important for organizations like Venezuela Solidarity Campaign to offer at a time like this, to give that window into a better world that our comrades in Venezuela are fighting for every single day. And with President Maduro calling for a summit for peace with all the BRICS nations, we know that it's, more important than ever to be loud and proud about our solidarity with Venezuela. Because in the coming years, Venezuela is going to be nothing but a significant force against fascism and a significant force against the heavyweight of US imperialism in not just the Trump administration years, but in whoever is to proceed him, whether Democrat or Republican. And we must take this seriously. We must fight the sanctions war because we have to acknowledge it is a war. It's a form of economic warfare that has killed tens of thousands of people and will kill tens of thousands more without us on the proverbial battlefield fighting that fight. No, as Sarah said, I'm from the Black Liberation Alliance, and we were so honored to go to have two delegations going to Venezuela over this past year through the VSC. And we cannot underestimate the impact and the importance of having been able to take young Black members of the diaspora who are living here in the Imperial Core to witness the revolution making, to witness the real social and economic and political changes happening down on the ground in Venezuela after, the last summer of riots and racist fascist pogroms spreading all across Britain, even, coming towards London, the place where you would not have thought that it would ever come to place. It was ultimately a breath of fresh air to be able to attend what was the inauguration of the Youth and Student Anti-Fascist International in Caracas. And there we met with anti-fascists from across the global south and across the globe too, so many from Europe. And we learned from the anti-imperialist, anti-colonial, feminist, anti-racist, even pro-climate justice initiatives that all these people are spearheading, all these different movements who are coming together in this one space. And it was absolutely fascinating. We were witnessing and are witnessing history in the making. And when we were able to attend the inauguration of President Maduro and the Anti-Fascist Festival this year, this was actually the first time for many of our members of the delegation to come to Latin America. And what an introduction it was. You had hundreds of thousands of people on the street celebrating indigenous groups, feminist groups, comunas, LGBT groups, youth encampments, farmer motorcades, all represented and all representing and standing proudly by their newly elected and incumbent president. And this is all in spite of sanctions. And I still remember this young man, a young PSUV member, Anthony, and he said to me, he was tears streaming down his face. He said, "We did it. We've struggled so much. I've lived my life during sanctions, through sanctions, but we've did it. We've done it." And it's all these first-hand experiences, the photos, the videos, the memories of the dancing on the streets and the singing with Venezuelans that we hope and have been able to bring them home here to where hundreds of our members are. And so it's so important for all of us to take what we see, to take what we learn and what we've experienced in Venezuela and alongside our Venezuelan comrades into our daily lives so we can spread that message and follow in the examples of the revolutionaries fighting imperialism and colonialism. And we can only do that. We can only stand side by side with them by fighting with them, but from within the belly of the beast, where we are here in Britain. And so the continuation of organizations like Venezuela Solidarity Campaign are so important. It's so important to be a blow in the face of imperialism. It's an uppercut to the most malicious narratives of mainstream media about Venezuela and about why they deserve to be sanctioned. And most importantly, its existence and the existence of anti-imperialist campaigns like this is part of our responsibility and our duty to our comrades in Venezuela, because the multipolar world is coming, it is being built, it is here. Viva Venezuela, viva VSC. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Fiona, and for those kind of anecdotes from being there and the people that you spoke to. That was a great touch. And just to remind people that this is being live streamed, so it is on the Venezuela Solidarity Campaign's Facebook page. It'll be on YouTube, so you can watch it back, and please do get it shared so that more and more people can watch it too. We're now going to have a plug from the campaign itself. I think that's Matt.
Hi, Sarah. Yeah, I won't take up too much of your time for people who don't know me, and I'm looking at the attendee list, a lot of familiar faces, and also good to see people tuning in on Facebook and YouTube. My name's Matt Wilgus. I'm the coordinator of the Venezuela Solidarity Campaign, and delighted to welcome you to this anniversary event today, and also to have our international guest over to say no to the deadly sanctions on Venezuela. This is just a quick usual plug, really. Please, if you can, if you're not a member of the Venezuela Solidarity Campaign, please do join. The most important way you can contribute regularly to our work and keep us going is to join as a member. And if you are already a member, please do consider giving a one-off donation of £20 or what you can to our 2025 20 years of VSC special appeal. We don't have the big backing that other campaigns have. We have had, as Sarah mentioned at the start, we've had some difficult times and media attacks and difficult years in years gone by, as well as times where we've been sort of the flavour of the month with certain people. But we've managed to keep going. We've managed to keep building a base, and we've managed to keep calling out the sanctions on Venezuela and also the UK government stealing of the gold. So if you can, please do donate £20 to that special appeal today. And as well as joining, please try and get someone else to join, because without individual members in particular is the lifeblood of the campaign. We want to be going for another 20 years. Viva Venezuela, viva the VSC, and thank you everyone for your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you for all the work that you and all the volunteers do behind the scenes to keep the campaign going, because without you, we wouldn't be here this evening doing this fantastic event. Our next speaker is Dáire Hughes, who's an MP from Sinn Fein in Ireland. Dáire, I will hand over to you. You're very welcome.
Thank you very much, and Jadeve, Fáilte, welcome all. Fraternal greetings from everyone in Sinn Féin and from all Irish people who hold the value of freedom close to their hearts. We have felt the brutal sting of occupation and colonialism. We feel it still through the ongoing division of our country. So we instinctively empathise with all of those who have struggled and with all of those who struggle still. Goramila Mayagav, thank you very much for the invitation to take part in this online rally. It's timely that we gather today to recommit ourselves to solidarity with the Venezuelan people as the Venezuelan Solidarity Campaign marks its 20th year of activism. And I, for one, am proud of the contribution that my Sinn Féin party colleagues have made to this campaign over the years. I think principally of Chris Hazard MP, Senator Conor Murphy, and my predecessor, Mickey Brady. But we also look forward to a time when solidarity campaigns like this one exist only to support and promote our friends internationally, and we don't have to mobilise under the current circumstances. Alas, comrades, we are not there yet. We in Sinn Féin have a deep emotional connection to all peoples deprived of their freedom and self-determination, and with all peoples suffering under the yoke of colonialism. I reiterate our express condemnation of external interference in Venezuela and across Latin America, particularly by right-wing actors who seek to destabilise progressive socioeconomic advancements. Likewise, I reiterate our wholesale criticism of the Western sanction regimes that are currently suffocating Venezuela. We stand unshakably in support of the principle of self-determination. Democratically elected governments in South America and Central America and the Caribbean have the right to pursue the policies on which they were elected, free from outside interference and internal destabilisation. We and all progressives applaud those whose policies are effectively tackling poverty, inequality, and racism in the region, often in tremendously difficult circumstances, made worse by the economic war being waged through sanction regimes. Venezuela's current difficulties, like the difficulties faced by other nations worldwide, are best addressed and resolved through peaceful dialogue and constructive international cooperation. Outside interferences and sanctions are starving Venezuela of economic development and foreign exchange, harming both the public and the private sectors, and therefore all Venezuelans. It simply must cease. We in Ireland take international solidarity seriously. It is a product of our people for centuries enduring the oppression, famine, destitution, and occupation that came with British imperialism. Many were forced overseas. Many of our exiled children found common cause with Latin America's numerous anti-colonial struggles. I think instantly of Daniel Florence O'Leary, aide-de-camp of the great liberator Simón Bolívar, who is laid to rest in Venezuela's great pantheon of national heroes. So it is a great privilege for me to join you here today in solidarity in our joint and noble endeavour to build a better world. Imperialism in its old form and its new form continues to shape not just the destiny of Venezuela or Latin America, but billions of people globally. From Latin America to Africa, countries in the global south are trapped in a cycle of debt and dependency, their economies shaped by the demands of foreign powers and Western financial institutions. The vast siphoning of the wealth from the hands of the many into the pockets of the few, and the exploitation of the earth's natural resources for the same purpose has to come to an end. The opportunity for a new and multipolar world exists, free from plunder, free from slavery, and free from neo-colonialism. This is a world, comrades, that we must strive to build. We must always be steadfast in our solidarity with the struggles of the Venezuelan people and the struggles of all those who resist interference, occupation, and colonialism. We must march in close rank like the Silva in the Andes. We must stand firm in observing the right to resist and the right to self-determination of all the peoples of the world, from Caracas to Can Yunis. So friends and comrades, we Irish rebels will never be quiet. We will carry the people of Venezuela in our hearts until our lands are free.
Thank you so much for that fantastic contribution. And yeah, I've got nothing to add to that. It was spot on. Thank you. I did notice in the Q&A that Andy had mentioned that he'd been on a Venezuela Solidarity Campaign tour in 2004, and the report that he put together after it was Hope in the Eyes of Millions. And I just thought it was worth mentioning because isn't that fitting after the contributions that we've had already this evening? I'll move straight on to our next speaker, who is Carlos Ron, former Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs in Venezuela. Carlos, you are very welcome.
Well, thank you very much for this invitation. First of all, for me, it's a distinct honor to be able to be here with you to celebrate 20 years of Venezuela Solidarity Campaign, because celebrating solidarity, I think, is something that is a wonderful thing to do, because it shows the best of our humanity. It's celebrating something that, you know, that in all times of trouble, you have decided, far away from Venezuela, you have decided to take up our cause, to show what the truth of Venezuela is, what has been happening here, despite lies, despite manipulation, despite the persecution of the Venezuelan revolution. You have taken this task voluntarily. You have taken this out of your own conscience to come out and support a people that is struggling to define their own destiny. People that have been struggling, like we have, to just improve the life and dignify the life of the majority of Venezuelan people. So it's been 20 years of hard work, and I thank my brother Francisco, who I see, and many others who I've known along these 20 years for their commitment. And for that, I wanted to just share with you just a small excerpt of the famous Jamaica letter from Simon Bolivar, a letter that was written to express Bolivar's concern about the fate of then what was the colonies of Spain. And there was a mention that he does to the recipient of the letter, where he thanks him for his solidarity and for his interest in Venezuela. And I think those words are very pertinent to this campaign and to the work you've done. That's what I want to share with you. And I quote Simon Bolivar here saying, "Generous souls always interest themselves in the fate of a people who strive to recover the rights to which the Creator and nature have entitled them. And one must indeed be wedded to error and passion not to harbor this noble sentiment. You have given thought to my country and are concerned in its behalf, and for your kindness, I am warmly grateful." And I share that with you, my friends and comrades, because we are all here at the Bolivarian Revolution warmly grateful for the kindness and the support that you have given us all these years. Solidarity with what, you may ask, and I think this is a question that always concerned us in particular here in Venezuela, because people understand around the world that we have been suffering aggressions, we have been attacked. Now the sanctions, but also you know all the story that we went through, coup attempts, invasion attempts, all these attempts at derailing Venezuelan democracy. And we've never wanted solidarity to be solidarity from the perspective of a victimized people. We are strong people. We're people that we are proud and of our heritage, and we're proud of the future we're building. And we've always been interested in having people understand that when you are in solidarity with Venezuela, you're in solidarity with a process that's deepening democracy, that's taking it to a next level, that's making sure that grassroots participation increases and is taken into account. It has been a process that has defied corporate media. It has been a process that has promoted regional unity as a path to not only national and regional liberation, but also as a path to development. But today I want to just mention really quickly that I think one of the key aspects of this Bolivarian process, of this revolutionary process, is that Venezuela has also been, despite sanctions and aggressions and destabilization, Venezuela has been a force for peace. And I think today, where we stand, as the world stands, as this terrible aggression against the people of Palestine, against the people of Iran, and all the other peoples that have been attacked in recent weeks in West Asia, we are also standing for peace. I mean, we're also taking the time to demand that this unjustified Zionist aggression ends, that we can have a better world. And on June 23rd, President Maduro voiced something that was in the consciousness in the hearts of all Venezuelans. He voiced on a letter to leaders of the world the necessity to come to terms of peace, the necessity to end this aggression. He called for a global summit for peace and against war. He called for this to be for a lasting peace, a peace that has guarantees, for establishing a nuclear weapon-free zone in West Asia, starting with dismantling of Israel's nuclear arsenal, because, you know, as part of a UN-led effort, because I think we have to all agree that it has to be through the respect of international law and through the respect of multilateralism that we achieve that way, that we can really achieve that lasting peace. And of course, President Maduro also expressed his commitment and his support for the right of a Palestinian state to exist without aggression. There was no call for protagonism. President Maduro asked for the leadership of this initiative to be taken by the Arab League, by the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, the Gulf Cooperation Council, the BRICS. Anybody really in the world that has and aspires peace should be at the forefront of this, as we are. So in the coming weeks, we're also going to have here a People's Conference, People's meeting that shows that also the peoples of the world are in support of this call for peace. So when, my friends, when you think about solidarity with Venezuela, think not only of solidarity with a process that is deepening democracy in its own terms. Think not of only solidarity with the people that are decided to craft their own future, but think of solidarity with the people and a revolutionary government that have stood up in the world in favor of peace as well. Once again, congratulations for this 20 years of the campaign, and from the deepest place in my heart and in all Venezuelans' hearts, thank you for your solidarity with us.
Thank you so much for that, Carlos, and thank you for, not only mentioning around Venezuela, but other countries going through similar horrific situations as well, and for joining us tonight and taking the time to speak to us. Friends, we've got hundreds of people online with us this evening across Zoom, multiple social media platforms. We've got people from Lambeth, Worcestershire, Edinburgh, the US, Hackney, Islington, Norwich, Liverpool, Lewisham, Canada, Northampton, Wales, the Peak District. Truly an international meeting that we're having, and thank you to everyone that's already made donations through the meeting. We will move straight on to our next speaker, Alicia Castro, who is former Argentinian ambassador to Venezuela and the UK. Alicia, you are very welcome, and thank you for joining us this evening.
Muchas gracias, compañeras, compañeros. I hope that for the next 20 years we will all speak Spanish, because you'll be going so many times to Venezuela. And I'm very happy to meet you again. I have fond memories of 20 years ago when we were almost creating Venezuela Solidarity Campaign at the time. With, can remember, I was working at the time with the ITF, International Workers' Transport Unions in London. So I would meet often with those leaders that were looking at Venezuela with more and more interest on what was happening there with the Revolución Bolivariana. And we would meet with Bob Crow, Richard Gort, Alan Freeman, Ken Livingstone, etc. And then Francisco came, and well, I'm very happy to meet the old friends and the new friends joining at the Venezuela Solidarity Campaign that is always in need. It's such a paradox that we have a beacon in Venezuela of democracy, as Kate reminds us, and we can see that in the media they put Maduro and Venezuela as criminals. So it's my best advice to everyone in Venezuela that speaks about Venezuela is please go there and see by yourself what is happening. And talking about sanctions, I would very briefly quote Venezuela Foreign Minister, our friend Ivan Gil, that's saying unilateral coercive measures are part of a new form of colonialism. Through alleged economic suffocation, they are trying to force our entire nation to submit to the dictates of Washington and its satellites. And of course, it always had been and will be about regime change. I can remember that when I was ambassador to the UK between 2012 and 2015, I would see very frequently Julian Assange that had a diplomatic asylum at the embassy of Ecuador in London. And I was always asking him about, do you have something more about Argentina? Do you have something else about Venezuela? And he systematically would answer, if I had something else, I would have published it. But one day he said, have a look at this document. And he pointed me a document that was one of the most important documents and the most unknown documents that has been part of the disclosures of Snowden. And it is a document of the National Security Agency in 2007 that points out the strategic list of the goals and priorities of the National Security Agency. But most importantly, this document includes 6 countries that enduring targets for USA, objetivos estratégicos permanentes. Which are those 6 countries? China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, Iraq, North Korea, and Venezuela. Venezuela as the only one permanent strategic objectives of the United States. And in one part of this document, Mission F, you can read, to establish political responsibilities in order to prevent Venezuela from achieving regional leadership and implementing policies that negatively affect the global objectives of the United States, to prevent the growth of Venezuela's influence and leadership in political, ideological, and energy-related areas. So, friends, there it was written, the will to change the regime in Venezuela as they have done in so many countries. In Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Libya, and now they're trying to do that in Iran. And I hope that would be a very hard task to do. And they always try to do that in Venezuela. ¿Qué lo impidió? What was the reaction? The people. And the people that are very conscious of their political needs, of sovereignty, of the value of independence, they have the history, and they have the future, and they have hope. And I recently been in Venezuela para la toma de posesión of President Maduro. How do you say toma de posesión, Carlos? Inauguration of President Maduro in January. And I've been last month to Venezuela for the election of governors and members of parliament. And you can see people so happy in the streets. You can see people with hope, with needs, but with hope of a future, of a better future. And the sanctions, what I could see by myself is that the sanctions made the people more strong. The economy is strongest, the will is strongest, and they're always, of course, dancing and letting us know and letting the world know that Chávez vive, la lucha sigue. Chávez is alive, and the fight will continue, and it will continue. So I'm so happy to be joining you here today, and I hope that we can take notice of the new initiatives that are building in Venezuela, la Internacional Antifascista, the Anti-Fascist International, and now Maduro is talking a lot about the need for the world, especially in the Middle East, but the whole world, for peace and nuclear disarmament. And maybe we can think from the Venezuela Solidarity Campaign in joining in an anti-fascist of the una reunión, a meeting from the Internacional Antifascista in London. That would be, I think, a very. Do you think it's possible, Francisco? I guess he's saying a silent yes. And I was lucky enough to be ambassador to Venezuela when we were building this very strong regional bloc. And of course, there were the presidents at the time were or leftists or progressive. I mean, the two Kirchner governments, Hugo Chavez, Fidel Castro, Rafael Correa, Lula da Silva, president of Nicaragua, Ortega, president of Ecuador, Rafael Correa. And at the time, we were really convinced that we could change the world and that siglo XXI would be el siglo de América, as Chavez would like to say. But then we have radical changes in our region. We have lawfare, we have proscriptions of my ex-president, Cristina Fernández de Kirchner, as you know, in jail now. And so as Lula is visiting Cristina today, we have warfare, we have lawfare, we have a fascist as a president, a very, very loud fascist. And we will go on struggling to contribute through an enforcement of a regional bloc to create and to contribute to a multipolar world, to a pluripolar world, mundo multipolar, un mundo pluripolar de naciones iguales y soberanas y de personas todas y cada una con derecho a la felicidad. Some Spanish. Thank you very much. I'm very happy to meet you here again. And I hope that we can very soon do a meeting of the Internacional Antifascista in London.
Thank you so much, Alicia. That sounds like a brilliant idea and something we definitely ought to get working on. And I will start learning Spanish so that we can have a proper conversation at some point in the near future in Spanish properly. Thank you so much for that. I will move swiftly on to our next speaker, who is a good friend, Gawain Little, the General Secretary of the General Federation of Trade Unions, the GFTU. Gawain, you are very welcome. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Absolute pleasure, and thank you, Sarah, and thanks to Venezuela Solidarity Campaign for the invitation. I'm very pleased to be here celebrating 20 years of the campaign and calling for an end to sanctions and an end to US interference in Venezuela and the rest of Latin America. I had the great privilege to visit Venezuela and experience the transformations of the Bolivarian Revolution firsthand 20 years ago in 2005, just before the founding of the Venezuela Solidarity Campaign. Believe it or not, 20 years ago, as a much younger activist, I was a member of my trade union's youth section, the NUT at the time, and I was participating in the World Festival of Youth and Students, where 16,000 young people were welcomed to Caracas for that festival for 10 days of debate and discussion. And just the period that we spent there showed us so much about what was happening and what has been happening in Venezuela during this process. To start with the places where we were housed, it's not easy for a city to take on 16,000 guests for a progressive festival. And the area where we were housed was actually in partially built housing, which at the time the Venezuelan government was building in order to rehouse people from the slums around the edge of Caracas. And people were being moved from shacks with no running water, with no access to electricity or anything else, into new purpose-built blocks, not only with electricity, with running water, but with access to the internet, with other local amenities, social clubs, community centres, etc. That incredible transformation of people's lives led by the government in terms of housing gave us our first signal, I guess, of what was behind the ideas behind the Bolivarian Revolution. But we also got to see firsthand the literacy missions that were going out using a similar model to that used in Cuba in terms of increasing literacy in rural areas, transforming people's engagement with Venezuela's society. The medical missions, again, supported by Cuba, raising the standard of living, increasing access to medical service right across Cuba, but also not right across Venezuela, but also not just those basics of housing, of literacy, of access to medicine, etc., but the cultural missions that were bringing access to music, to the arts, etc., out more widely across Venezuelan society. And of course, the democratic process in 2005, Venezuela was involved in a massive engagement with the Venezuelan people over the constitution. Ensuring that every Venezuelan had access to, could read a copy and could genuinely understand the constitution of the country. Something that in Britain in 2025 would be almost unheard of if we think of how disengaged people are from their political system, how they look at a government that they feel does not enough for them, that alienates them, that turns them through anger to all kinds of negative responses in this country, and that when people do respond, when people try to have their voice heard through protests, are arrested, are locked down and shut down. And the difference in Venezuela of that direct engagement and actively trying to engage people in understanding and playing an active role in the constitution and the democracy, what we saw was genuinely, truly transformative. Of course, over the last 20 years, we've also seen consistent US interference in Venezuela through sanctions, through funding extremist and violent movements within Venezuela. And we should be really, really clear that some of these people claiming to form opposition, not all, but some claiming to form opposition within Venezuela, are nothing more than violent far-right extremists funded by the US, a foreign power. And of course, the constant political destabilization of Venezuela, both internally and internationally. And yet, in spite of that, the Venezuelan government, the Venezuelan people have continued that social transformation, have continued to engage the whole of Venezuela in the transformation of the daily lives of the people who live there. And not only that, but continue to play a role both in the region and internationally. And I think the recent announcement, the recent call from the Venezuelan government and from Maduro for a peace conference, a call for people to build on both regional peace in the Middle East and a call for a nuclear-free zone there, but also to talk more widely about world peace is, I think, incredibly significant that a country under such attack internally and internationally still puts itself at the forefront of peace, still puts itself at the forefront of anti-imperialist international relations, I think is a tribute both to the Venezuelan government, but also the Venezuelan people standing strong. And for me, that's why it's absolutely crucial that we, both in the Venezuela Solidarity Campaign, but also across the wider trade union movement, engage in solidarity with Venezuela. Yes, because this is a trade union issue, because certainly the sanctions, the political destabilization, the violence that the US funds within Venezuela targets and impacts on working class people. And that is a trade union issue which working class people in this country must stand in solidarity against. But also, as Carlos reminded us just a moment ago, not just for the negative reasons, we stand in solidarity with the Venezuelan people in their struggle to transform their own society, because they present new ideas, new options for how we can engage working people in a chance to lead their country and the direction of their country. And there's an awful lot that we can learn from Venezuela as it stands up against US interference and against world imperialism. So I'm here today to express on behalf of the General Federation of Trade Unions our ongoing continued solidarity with the Venezuelan people and with the Bolivarian Revolution, and to encourage all trade unions to stand with Venezuela, stand with the Venezuelan people, and together let's struggle in solidarity internationally, winning in our own countries right across the world to set working people free right across our world. Thank you.
Thanks ever so much for that, Gawain. And you know what a brilliant point to end on. You know, solidarity does not know borders, and it should be international, and we should all be supporting each other. And yeah, thank you for coming along and for your contribution. Friends, we're going to have a short video now from Vijay, Prashad, the Tricontinental and author. They couldn't be with us tonight, so they've sent a video for us to watch.
There are really no such thing as sanctions. Sanctions are not a thing. Sanctions don't exist. There are no sanctions on Venezuela. What there are unilateral coercive measures placed by the United States government in an illegal fashion against the country of Venezuela. My name is Vijay Prashad. I'm the director of Tricontinental Institute for Social Research. We have looked into this matter very seriously, read the UN Charter of 1945, which is the most important consensus document in the world, on several times. We studied the Charter carefully. Let's just be clear about one thing. The UN Charter of 1945, a consensus treaty document, says that a country can individually do whatever it wants bilaterally against another country. That's fine. That's a country's choice. But no country can enforce a unilateral coercive measure against another country without a UN Security Council resolution. That's there in the UN Charter. Without a UN Security Council resolution, you can't enforce your sanctions or any coercive measures against another country. I mean, that's illegal in international law. If the United States doesn't want to trade with Venezuela, that's up to the United States government. But it cannot force other countries to follow its own opinions about Venezuela and create a regime which prevents a country like Venezuela from accessing dollars or selling its oil. Those are unilateral coercive measures imposed on Venezuela, and those are illegal. There is no UN Security Council that says that, Chapter 6 measures can be taken against Venezuela, or the worst case scenario, Chapter 7 measures, including armed force. There is no UN Security Council resolution, and there will not be any because there's no cause for it. We should be clear about this, that the entire US structure against the country of Venezuela is illegal. The entire structure that they impose on Venezuela is illegal. It is not just my opinion. UN special rapporteurs have said so. Lawyers looking at this have said so pretty plainly. We stand with Venezuela because it is the victim of an illegal war. And I use the war deliberately, whether a hybrid war, whatever kind of war. This is a war that the United States is waging against the people of Venezuela. They may not be dropping bombs, 500, 200-pound bombs on Venezuela, but they are certainly structuring Venezuela's economy into a cage and preventing a Venezuelan government from the time when Hugo Chavez was the president to now Nicolas Maduro is the president, structuring and engaging the governments so that neither the Chavez government nor the Maduro government have been able to trade, normal basic trade with other countries, normal basic utilization of its oil, petroleum resources, unable to do that, buying basic foodstuffs during the pandemic, buying basic medicine and services, impossible. The sanctions engaging Venezuela as the blockade against Cuba, again illegal, has tried to engage Cuba. I mean, I know that other countries have, with great courage, broken the US blockade, but the United States, dangerous and decadent as it is, has genuinely suffocated very many parts of basic economic activity, basic commerce by governments such as Venezuela, Cuba, and then a whole host of governments around the world, Zimbabwe, you name it, you got it in there. They are all sanctioned, which is why larger and larger areas of the world are deciding to trade in local currencies because they just can't get access to the dollar. De-dollarization is not happening because somebody is coming in to supplant the dollar. It's because the US government has been denying countries access to the dollar. And so, Venezuela and other countries have had to find unusual ways to trade and now creating perhaps new trading systems. The hybrid war against Venezuela is very much in line with the attack on Iran right now. These countries all facing attack because they are trying to exercise their sovereignty. Nothing illegal about exercising your sovereignty. Venezuela is entitled to its sovereignty. It's entitled not to be a victim of illegal, universal, unilateral, coercive measures. It is entitled not to be a victim of these measures. Thank you very much.
What a great contribution that was, and we thank Vijay for taking the time to send that video across. Just before I bring in our last speaker and good friend, to conclude the rally, we've heard from our speakers the truth about what's happening and how the absolute key now is to oppose external intervention in Venezuela and call for an end to US sanctions. And of course, the UK government has to and should and must return Venezuela's gold. So what kind of solidarity can we offer? Because I know many of you will be asking that. We can help by joining Venezuela Solidarity Campaign as an individual, an affiliate in your trade union branch, hosting speakers on Venezuela and from Venezuela, and giving a donation and doing the online action links that have been posted in the chat throughout the call. The campaign does a lot of work for an organisation with a small budget, so any support we can give really does make a big difference. Thank you to everyone for coming and watching. We have streamed it on YouTube. There's been a couple of questions about whether it's been recorded. It is on YouTube. You can go back and watch sections of it, and you can share it to other people as well. Without any further ado, I would like to bring in our last speaker, but very much not the least, Francisco Dominguez, Venezuela Solidarity Campaign Secretary. Francisco, it's a pleasure as always. You are very welcome.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I mean, most of the very good points have been made, which is the complications of anybody who speaks last. Nevertheless, I remember one of the visits with the delegation to Venezuela. And one of the things we did, we went into a supermarket, a subsidized state supermarket. And, you know, I went in, looked around the shelves, and what I found was something I really liked, which is black beans. And I remember I asked the people there, can I buy? And they said, of course you can. So I got a package and I began to look at it. And on the front, you know, the plastic bag, there was information about 1 kilogram and so on, the usual stuff. But then I look at the reverse, and what I saw there struck me really, struck my heart. There were articles of the Constitution telling people their rights. And then I checked other items in the supermarket, each one of them exactly the same. On the front, they have the information about the product, and at the back was articles of the Constitution that benefit the people. I said, my goodness, this is absolutely unbelievable. And at the time, Chavismo was not as strong and as well organized as it is today, but I think that sort of activities, that sort of measures, those sort of initiatives actually politicize the population to the level they're in today. So that is the nature of the revolution we are discussing. I want to go through a few things, if I can. The first one is the basis of the campaign. I know this is basic, but I think it's very important to reiterate it because we got it right. Number one, we defend totally, absolutely, and unconditionally the right of Venezuela to determine its own future. This is absolutely sacrosanct from our point of view. We do not, under any circumstances, no matter how inclined we may feel to tell the Venezuelans how to do whatever it is. That's their business. So that's number one. Number two, we demand, and this is a constant position that we publicize everywhere, which is we demand the immediate and unconditional lifting of all the unilateral coercive measures, all of them, absolutely, with no conditions whatever. I mean, Vijay already explained, the nature of these things. But number three, having all of these sort of structures which inform our activity, what we have done in 20 years, I was sort of looking at this in preparation for this meeting. And I know that we could never, outdo the Venezuelans, but we must have produced hundreds and hundreds of articles explaining things to our movement and to everybody. I just did a sort of mathematical calculation. If you did 10 articles, as an organization per year, that itself is 200. And of course, we know we did much, much more than that. Every time there was an election, every time there was a problem, every time there was an offensive by the right wing of the United States, we will come out with stuff. And our stuff was, as factual as possible. We did not engage in ideological debates because it's not our job necessarily, although we do defend the revolution intellectually. And we produce extremely good material. One of them is a pamphlet that we produced some years ago explaining that the nature of the revolution was a combination of social progress and democracy. And that combination of social progress and democracy was actually transforming a nation and transforming a people. And, every time we visited it, we saw these with our own eyes, literally every time. The second thing we did was, as part of the social progress was the trade union legislation that Chavez actually enacted some years ago. And we produced a special with the Institute of Workers' Rights. We produced a pamphlet explaining the significance and, the reach and how progressive this law was. We also, when the United States made an agreement with the right-wing government in Colombia in 2009, I remember at the time I thought it must be the right-wing, the Republicans, but actually it was Obama, Hillary Clinton. They made the agreement. And the agreement was to install 7, if not more, military bases in Colombia, preparing the ground, because there was no other purpose for it, to actually pounce on Venezuela militarily. And we produced immediately a pamphlet with the absolute detailed information of what was involved, what exactly was the significance, how dangerous this was. And I remember, the preface was written by Kate Hudson, which gave us much more coverage because of that. And finally, we did more, but finally, one of the interesting things was this. We agonize every time that we know we got the information about how bad the unilateral coercive measures were actually damaging Venezuela. Just to give you an example, which I always use, under the military dictatorship of Pinochet, 5,000 people were assassinated. According to research done by experts, between 2017 and 2018 alone, 40,000 people died in Venezuela unnecessarily when they could have survived. I continue investigating this. I reckon that actually the number of people that have died as a consequence of the sanctions or the unilateral coercive measures is in the region of 150,000, if not more. Can you imagine what it is when your baby, who was born with a congenital problem, and you don't have the medicine, when somebody who is suffering from chronic disease, respiratory disease, and cannot get the information, anybody who's suffering from HIV and cannot get the medicine, and then you see your relatives dying in front of your eyes, one after another, for years and years, literally 4-5 years. Worse, when we learn the information, the economic information, that Venezuela, as a consequence of these measures, these unilateral coercive measures, has lost 99% of its revenue, 99%. And they made this country run with 1% of its revenue that came from oil. That gives you an idea of the resilience of the revolution. So as a consequence of that, we produced a document, a pamphlet, which was, Maduro's decade. He went through hell, leading the country in the worst possible moment because of the aggression of the United States. And he managed to recover the country. At one point, Venezuela was 1.5 million% inflation. I cannot imagine what that is, but it's absolutely horrific. You can imagine money is completely worthless, and commerce and everything is completely distorted to extraordinary levels. And then it was able to, in something like 4 or 5 years, reduce it to single digits as a consequence of restoring the economic activity. Venezuela was importing, during Chavez, was importing 70% of the food that it consumed. And then when the sanctions were applied, then all that went. People went hungry. And now Venezuela is 97% self-sufficient on food. And this year, the economy is going to grow between 6 to 8%, which is one of the largest or greatest in Latin America. So that gives you an idea. And this brings me to the final point I want to make. The United States cannot accept and tolerate that this succeeds. This is not possible from their point of view. So they have to do everything in their power to destroy. Even though they try to destroy, the recovery makes their intention even more intense. And one of the campaigns that have been launched by the extreme right wing of Venezuela recently, we're talking about the last few days, immediately after the exchange, I'm going to use diplomatic language here, the exchanges between Iran and Israel that took place recently. And the extreme right wing in Venezuela made the point that somehow Venezuela was involved in producing drones for Iran, and as a consequence was a threat to the United States, and they began to lobby very heavily. They have, Marco Rubio as the state secretary, they have Donald Trump as the president. You can imagine what that is. And there is a possibility which is extremely dangerous. And I think that's where the extreme right wing, advised by the worst possible people in the State Department of the United States, are thinking is this. Were there to be any interruption of the supply of oil from the Middle East to the United States because of complications over there, and continue to use diplomatic language, then Venezuela will become an absolutely necessary target to ensure that the United States get the supplies of oil that it wants, and at any rate, that might be the possibility for them to finally, bring about regime change. So the extreme right wing have been campaigning literally openly for the United States to militarily attack Venezuela. That is exactly what is posed right now. In other words, they're upping up the stakes to ensure that they, maximize the pressure, and they think this is the opportunity. Let's see what's happening, but we have to be extremely conscious of this. And they cannot allow, and this is my final point, Chair, they cannot allow this to succeed because the latest wave of the development of the revolution is what is known as the communal state. That is to say, the grassroots organizations are the ones who are going to determine what happened in terms of budget, in terms of initiatives, in all sorts of ways, locally, and they will be elected. And, already there are thousands of such grassroots organizations. So the revolution is continued to develop in the direction of becoming what they call a protagonistic and participatory democracy. All these two words which are difficult for me to pronounce. So that's why the United States cannot accept, and therefore it is very important. Venezuela plays an absolutely leading role in Latin America and in the world, as it's been already explained. So from that point of view, imagine the possibility, God forbid, that the United States pounces and then destroys the revolution because it's got the capacity. Then it will set back the progressive politics in Latin America for 50 years, if not longer. So therefore, we have absolutely obligation to ensure that our government, we put pressure on them so that they're not accomplices on any adventure of this nature. And there is the issue of Guyana, where the British government is playing a very perfidious role, as they always have done. So therefore, I want to heed and, reiterate the call that we need to redouble our solidarity with the Bolivarian Revolution. And please, if you haven't joined, do join the Venezuela Solidarity Campaign. It's a very good organization. We are very effective. I know it's, from ourselves propaganda, but, we are effective, and you will be joining an organization which produces good results. So viva Venezuela. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Francisco, for that and for finishing us off perfectly. Thank you everybody for joining this evening. Enjoy the rest of your evening, or different day part, depending on where in the world you are. And we will see you soon on an international anti-fascist meeting, if nowhere else. Thanks all our speakers. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.